Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we are exploring a powerful essay by Ngugi Thiong'o titled Decolonizing the Mind. Kindly excuse me if I just pronounced his name wrong because I think it's a difficult pronunciation, but that's what I found on the internet when I was looking for the pronunciation. So I am going to go with Ngugi Thiong'o. So, like I said, we'll be talking about decolonizing the mind. This is not just an essay, it's a manifesto. It's a call to action for reclaiming identity and culture in a world that's still shaped by colonialism. This work raises deep questions about language, identity, and the lingering effects of colonialism. So let's break down it step by step. To understand this essay, it's important to know a bit about the man himself, that is Ngugi. Thiong'o is one of the most important writers and thinkers to come out of Africa. He was born in Kenya in 1938 during a time when the country was under the British colonial rule. Growing up, Ngugi experienced the harsh realities of colonialism firsthand. His family was directly affected by the Mau Mau Rebellion, a movement that sought to liberate Kenya from British control. He lost his stepbrother to the violence, and his mother was also brutally tortured by the British. These experiences deeply shaped Ngugi's understanding of oppression and resistance. Despite these challenges, he pursued education, eventually studying at a university in Uganda and then Leeds University in England. Now, here's the turning point in his life. When Ngugi began his writing career, like many African authors at the time, he also wrote in English. His early novels, such as Weep Not, Child and The River Between, they were well received and they were considered groundbreaking. But as he became more politically conscious, Ngugi began to question that why African stories were being told in a colonial language. This led to a profound shift. Ngugi decided to abandon writing in English and instead write in his native language, Kikuyu. He even rejected his colonial Christian name, that was James Ngugi, and he reclaimed his identity as Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Okay? His essay, Decolonizing the Mind, reflects this transformation. It's a critique of how colonialism used language as a weapon to control and alienate people, and it's a call for cultural and linguistic liberation. This essay by Ngugi, it starts by unpacking the idea of colonialism. He explains that colonialism is not just about taking over a country's land or resources. It's a two-part system. That is, it has two faces. First is the visible face, that is the economic and political domination. This is the more obvious side of colonialism, right? Foreign powers invade, exploit resources, and impose their rule. In Kenya, the British controlled land and governance, often through violence and oppression, right? Then we have the hidden face, that is cultural domination, okay? That's a more insidious side, cultural domination. Through education, religion, and language, colonial powers imposed their culture on the colonized, making the colonized feel inferior. This is what Ngugi calls the colonization of the mind. Think about this for a moment. When colonizers replaced the native languages with English, they were not just teaching people to communicate, they were reshaping how people thought, how they felt, and saw the world. And I think this should be very clear to us as Indians, since we were also colonized by the British, who replaced the language of instruction from Sanskrit and Persian with English, right? It is the result of this particular thing that today we cannot even read our original texts and we rely on the translations of our texts by mostly foreign scholars, which most of the times comes with interpretations that suit their purposes, right? Often presenting India and the Indian culture in a negative light. Not just this, but it is also the result of the British replacing our native languages with English that we still believe that speaking in English is a matter of pride, something that becomes a marker of being educated, whereas speaking in our own tongues is frequently looked down upon, even in the academic circles that teach this particular thing. See, the history of English in India is something that you should know, especially if you're preparing again for the exams, for these competitive papers. So this is something that I do take up in my online course in much detail. So if you want, you can enroll in the course if you want a deeper understanding of the history and if you want to prepare for these exams thoroughly, okay? Now coming back, Ngugi focuses on the role of language in this cultural domination, okay? He argues that language is not just a way to talk. It's the carrier of a people's culture, values, and identity. When you lose your language, you lose a piece of yourself. Before colonialism, Ngugi grew up in a world where language and culture were deeply interconnected. He recalls evenings spent around the fire, listening to stories in his native tongue, Gikuyu. These were not just bedtime tales, they were moral lessons, reflections of life, and a way to pass down values. For example, many stories featured weak but clever animals like the hare. Children learned to root for the underdog, appreciating resilience and wit. Stories also taught the difference between selfish individuals and those who work for the community's goods. But colonialism disrupted this harmony. When Ngugi started school, the language of instruction was no longer Gikuyu, it was English. Suddenly, his native language was treated as inferior. Children were even punished for speaking it. English was not just a language anymore, it became a symbol of power and success. Just something that I told you right now, है ना? Those who excelled in English were rewarded, while those who spoke their native tongue were shamed, something that happened to us in school as well. Ngugi describes this as alienation. Kids like him were pulled away from their own culture and drawn into a world that was not theirs. Oral traditions started to disappear, replaced by stories from foreign culture that had little relevance to African life. Okay, Ngugi explains that this alienation, this happens in two ways. One would be disconnection from reality. Okay, children learning in a foreign language became detached from their environment. The language they thought in was not the language of their home or of their community or culture. That would be the first way. Second was identification with the colonizer. Over time, people began to see the colonizers' culture as superior. Again, relate this to India. They internalized the idea that their own traditions and languages were backward or primitive. Again, like I said, connect this to India, right? That how speaking in English is a matter of pride in India. And that's just one example on how we have internalized that our own traditions are backward, that they're primitive. But interestingly, when the very same thing gets a stamp of approval from the West, then we are fine, because only then we adopt them. Okay, so now Ngugi compares this to separating the body from the mind. When a society's thoughts and language are disconnected from its lived experience, it becomes fragmented, it becomes disjointed. Okay, now Ngugi's solution to this alienation is very clear. And what's that? Reclaim the native languages. He believes that writing in Gikuyu is a step towards cultural liberation. Native languages carry the rhythms of life, the struggles of the people, and the essence of their identity. See, note here that Ngugi is not against learning foreign languages, but he argues that a child must first feel rooted in their own language, no, and in their culture. Only then can they approach other languages without feelings of inferiority. Okay. Now you must be wondering that why does this even matter today? See, even today, Ngugi's message is incredibly relevant. Why? In a world where English dominates as a global language, many native languages and cultures are at risk of being forgotten. Ngugi's essay reminds us that preserving linguistic and cultural diversity is not just about the past, it's about shaping a more equitable future. To conclude, Ngugi wa Thiong'o's Decolonizing the Mind challenges us to think deeply about the power of language and its role in shaping identity. His call to embrace native languages is a call to reclaim pride, culture, and agency. Okay, so that would be all for this video on decolonizing the mind. Remember, Thiong'o again is a very famous name in post-colonial theory and also an important writer. You need to be familiar with his name, his works, and his theories, such as the one that we talked about today. Study about him in detail for the exams, again, for especially if you're preparing for papers like the UGC NET, CUET, and GATE. And if you're self-studying, but if you need any help, then you can always join my online course. You get detailed lectures and PDFs for each lecture, where I've made notes in a very compact manner to save your time. But they still manage to cover each important point. Not just that, you get chronologies, you get mock tests, you get the previous year questions sorted into categories, and so much more. Just visit my website, theankitajain.com, where you'll find the details. You can also call me on the number shown above. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video interesting, hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Also, do not forget to press the bell icon to be notified whenever I upload a video. If you want to get in touch with me, then follow me on Instagram and Facebook as well. Download my app if you want to access some free material, and also join my Telegram channel for these free PDFs and quizzes. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.